Hi, I'm Adam and this is the UpLinkPort, and in today's episode we're going to be looking at the UTEL test gear that would normally sit in an exchange for service testing, with little more than a diagram that seems to raise more questions than it answers for me. Why do I do this to myself? Why? So whether you're into retro networking gear or just curious on how things work, stick around. So first of all, I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and a good New Year. I, in true Adam fashion, ended up being ill for all of it. I still have a lingering cough, which I seem to cannot get rid of at the minute. So I apologise in advance if I end up in a coughing fit and this ends up being cut in really weird places. I can't help it. It is beyond annoying, but what is new for me? Speaking of new, the new Patreons are up on screen. If you have joined Patreon since the last video, thank you very much. As I said, your names are up on screen now. You don't need to, and as I always say, make sure you are looking after yourselves first before you give me any of your hard-earned money. Any of your hard-earned money that you do give me goes towards supporting stupid stuff like this and also building the channel as well. But if you can't do that and you can't afford that, that's not a problem. Just make sure you are subscribed, like the video, and we will grow the channel in other ways. And that's all I want, is to bring you guys videos that I question my own sanity as to why I'm even attempting with no documentation. But as we've seen in past videos, like with the advert and everything like that, I seem to be a sucker for punishment. So yeah, we will move on from that. But yes, thank you to everyone that has subscribed on Patreon. Obviously there is the store as well if you want to buy anything from that. There is a promotion on at the second, but by the time this comes out that will have disappeared. But jump on Discord as well, because always promotions run on there as well. Right, UTEL. What is a UTEL? So UTEL is basically a brand of test equipment that would typically sit in an exchange between the customer premises and the service provider, and would enable service providers to run copper line tests on the line between the exchange and the customer premises, and also locally to make sure things are working before they go off out the exchange. Now this has been a changing landscape for many years. Back when broadband was first released in the UK, typically your phone services would go through BT. There were other providers that you could use via a process called LCR, which was least cost routing, and they'd basically give you a little box or a prefix code to dial before you dialed a number, and the boxes would do that automatically, but it would route it over their network to give you cheaper call rates. Now, BT had their own test gear in the exchange for line testing as well as broadband testing, and then when the LLU operators came out, which is local loop unbundling, which is where a separate third-party operator would come and buy a cabinet or rent a cabinet within an exchange, put their own kit in, just like what we've got with the DSLAM, but obviously they needed to be able to run their own tests as well, so they would have their own version of test equipment, and typically it was UTEL because that's who most of the service providers used in the UK. I'm not aware of there being others. UTEL is typically the main one that I have come across with all of this, but you ended up with a scenario where you effectively had two tests, one for the physical copper line and one for the broadband service, and over time it got to the point where broadband providers could run a copper line test as well, because back in the day you had to go to your broadband provider who'd run a test and say, no, there's a fault on the line, you need to go to your voice provider, and then you'd have to go to your voice provider to get them to run a test on the line and confirm it and get it fixed. That has all since changed, and also with the introduction of LLU operators being able to do their own voice services as well, it makes sense for everything to talk to each other within the exchange, but also LLU operators can now do everything from their own kit. Speaking of LLU operators, this actually came from Zen. The exchange code is on the back of this. However, Adam forgot to check where that exchange code was before he started filming, so I shall throw that up on screen now. As always, I leave the labels on these because it's historic. I like to know where they come from, and it adds to it as well. So I will check where that is and throw it up on screen. But before we go anywhere near connecting this, because the guide, I'm trying to put it off, because the guide that Zen have sent me is somewhat confusing in that there are devices here, or there's more devices here that are on the guide. So either I've got something here that I shouldn't have, or there's something on the guide that's missing. I'm kind of leaning towards the former in that I've got something here that I shouldn't have, but I need to work out what that is. But before we do any of that, I need to get this powered up, and I don't know what the polarity is on any of these. I'm imagining one of those has got an earth pin, but I'm not sure. And as always, I'm not going to get anything else or another one of these, so I need to make sure it's correct before I plug it in. So we need to see if they've got polarity protection on them, and also just which way the polarity is. So I am going to go and take the lids off to work that out first, And then once they're powered up, we'll look at getting them connected. So a million screws later and 2 rack mounting brackets, I'm finally into it. Now, I hadn't actually planned to cover this in any depth. Now, I've made the cable for it, which is what I was going to do. However, when I took the lid off, I kind of saw more than I was expecting. I mean, to be honest, I don't really know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting to have literally an ADSL router in this, which is exactly what this is. From what I found online, this is very few and far between, but I have seen a few people use these in sort of modular DIY custom cases. But it is an ADSL router, so much so they've actually cut the antenna off on the board for the wireless side of stuff, and there is actually a WPS button down here as well, or even a Wi-Fi button. I can't quite see it from here, for the Wi-Fi side of stuff. So, I mean, it makes sense, because obviously, as I kind of alluded to in a previous video, I wasn't sure if these did ADSL sync testing, and obviously this particular one does. Now, sort of from a layout point of view, there does seem to be a DC step down. I'd imagine this is 12 volts. It does just say modem on that, but typically these would have been 12 volts. So I imagine that's stepping that down. Everything else is pretty much off the shelf. Even the RJ11 cable itself is a standard length. It's just been cable tied. One of the reasons I took the lid off this as well is not only to work out the power, but I also heard some rattling around inside. That rattling around inside is actually this cable literally just flapping around. So I wanted to make sure nothing was actually loose in happened in shipping. Obviously, you've got the RJ45 cable going between what they call the UTEST processor and the router. This board here is, well, it's actually the manufacturer of what's on the front, which is the UTEL 312 test head. So I imagine this, and these look like loads of little relays in here, which makes sense because they're going to be swapping between the outputs that are coming into this. Having said that, this is only potentially testing one line at a time, so it'd be interesting to see what all this does. I mean, potentially this can be populated for a much bigger test head. Now, what that entails or not, I don't know. Obviously, you could potentially just get PSTN versions of this, so maybe that's what that's for. But it'd be interesting to see what happens when we power this up. Does that router actually come into sync, or not into sync, but actually come up and stay up? Or does it only come up when a test is running? I'm not entirely sure. There were loads of requirements for keeping interference down in the Exchange. So I'm not entirely sure what would happen with all of this. I think the next thing to do is actually just plug this in and see what powers up, and again, go for that. I wasn't expecting to cover this. This is quite interesting from my point of view. I did actually throw a picture up on this on Patreon and Discord, so if you're not already on Discord, go and get involved in Discord, because I do throw up sort of early content that's come out on Patreon and then put it up on Discord for people to see as well. But they were fascinated by this, and so am I. I'm really curious to see how all this works together and how it connects to everything else. Okay, so I've just powered this up and there are a load of relays clicking in the background, which you might be able to hear, but if not, so it does appear to be doing some sort of self-test in the background. Now, I have got my multimeter out so we can actually probe around and test for power on this side. The nice thing to note is I did actually get the polarity around the right way for this, as I didn't with the Zoho, but we'll gloss over that. Now that light is flashing red and yellow, so I'm assuming it's still booting. I don't know what any of this means. There's a load more clicking going on in the background. I have no idea how long this takes to boot. Okay, well, clicking stopped. That's now flashing green. Not that you can see it actually, because the multimeter's in the way, but it's just there. So, interestingly, that router hasn't come on. So either this is dead, or this only comes on during a test, which I suspect might be the case. But let's just make sure we've got everything where it should be. Okay, now let's test the voltage on here. Okay, and we basically have nothing, which is slightly concerning, because either this is dead, or as I said, this is only powered when a test is required. I said there were fairly rigorous sort of standards in the Exchange for reducing interference and so forth. So it's possible this is only powered on when a test is required. I suppose I could grab a power supply from over here, and we could actually power this up to see if this does actually work. At least it'll prove whether it's this or well, obviously this hasn't got any power, but it'll prove whether this is working. I don't know, maybe this was turned off because of an issue. I honestly don't know. The first thing we need to do as well is just work out what center positive is, which take that off. I'm assuming it's just tested, but okay. Right, so it is center positive. Let's throw that to one side for the minute. Now, from what I can see, that does say 12 volts, 1 amp on that, and this is 12 volts, 1.5 amps, so it'll be absolutely fine. Now, I don't know if this is going to have any implications of powering this up with it supposed to be off, with the UTEL not expecting to see it on, so. And that's typical, that doesn't fit. What else have I got lying around I can bodge this with? I have another barrel jack, these are the same. Okay, they're the same. The annoying thing is I don't have, this is a power supply, so I don't know what I do. Actually, I'm just going to check to see whether that's sensed to positive as well. Before I blow something up and doing all of this. Which it is, that's cool, right. So we want you into you. Don't do as I do as I say, so don't do this. And turning power on would help. Okay, something did not like that. One moment, please. Okay, we are back and heart attack over. It was just actually this arcing and obviously charging the capacitors that scared the living daylights out of me. That is actually booting off for 12 volts. Now, like I said, I have no idea if this is going to cause an issue with this booting while this not expecting it to be on, potentially. So I am going to stop what I'm doing before I do actually blow anything up. Throw that to one side and plug this back in as it was. Now, it raises the question of, is this faulty? I honestly don't know. Or again, does this only get powered when a test is required? I think before I blow anything up on this, I'm going to get the lid back on and we're going to try and get it connected. I don't know if this needs everything patched into it to work, and that is the next problem with all of this. I have no idea how all of these connect together. So that is the next challenge. So I'm going to go and work that out with the guide and see where we get to. Right, so everything is put back together. I have unplugged it. I did take the lid off of the ISMC32ES-EU because that needs power as well. There wasn't anything interesting in that. I will throw a picture up on screen so you can see it for anyone who's interested, but it is nowhere near as laid out, shall we say, as the actual test head end on here. Now, this is where I've got to in terms of the connection diagram that Zen sent me, which I will throw up on screen and try and work out how I'm going to explain this and refer to that at the same time. However, I know this is already wrong because in that document it references 2 units and I've got 4 here. Well, actually there's 4 on the guide, there's 2 TAMs. Now, I believe this is the TAM module, which stands for Test Access Matrix. It's what maps effectively all the copper pairs back to the, I believe, test bus to go off and do all of its testing. That I have no idea where it goes to. I don't know if it goes into a test bus port direct or whether it goes into this like switch effectively at the top. I don't know. There's also some confusion as to what these actually are. Now, as I said, I'm pretty sure I know what the TAM is, and there's 2 of them listed on the diagram. I don't believe I've got the one for the Zoho, and I believe this is the one for the ZYXEL. The UTEST-312, I believe, is the head end. The confusion comes in with the mod control or MC unit. Now, none of the ports on that picture match any of these. The closest I can kind of see is this. However, it seems to reference a load of switches or power on this side. I frankly don't know. As I said, all of this is powered off at a minute because I don't know if plugging one of these cables in wrong is going to fry something. I don't know if these are carrying minus 48 volts or test current or test voltages and when it's turned on. I simply don't know. And I don't want to blow anything up. Previous clip excluded. But I need to work this out, and I think the only way I'm going to get this connected properly is to send out an SOS to Zen to say, help, how does that guide reference to this? What have I got here that I shouldn't have? What's not on the diagram but should be on the diagram? Help, basically. The next challenge I've got is even when I get all of this connected, we then need to work out how to access it. And again, this is part of my confusion because there's 2 LAN ports, or Ethernet and LAN. My understanding is you'd log into potentially this to control the test head end as to what test bus it's selecting to run the tests. I don't know. I can't imagine you having to log into 2. Why would you need to log into 2? And also in here there is a MMI port, which is it module to module interconnect? I honestly don't know. You've got switch bus down here, test bus down here. There's a lot. I mean, if I unplug all of this and then reference back the video if I need to plug anything back in, but you can see there is an awful lot going on, and frankly I don't know what's what. So I think the best thing is, as I said, I'm going to reach out to Zen to find out where stuff should go, if they can send me any diagrams that is connected, and fingers crossed we get it all connected properly, and then the next hurdle is access. So several days have passed and I'm smiling because it has been several days well worth waiting. Now, as many of you know, I talk to an awful lot of engineers within Zen, whether it be in the NOC, whether it be in networks, but overall they are a fantastic bunch of people. Lee, who I've been speaking to in the NOC, I have known for literally decades, and they're all amazing in the NOC, but Lee has been there for such a long time. I get on really well with him, and I happened to be speaking to him about the fact that I was doing the UTEL video and I was stuck on how to get everything connected because the guide didn't match what I was expecting, well, what I had on the desk really. And Lee said he didn't know himself, but he knew a man who did. And he went off in the background and reached back out to me and said, Adam, you need to contact a gentleman called Mark. Mark is our senior field engineer. He goes and installs all of these and decommissioning them. He knows exactly how to connect them. Here's his contact details. And I could not believe it. So Lee, thank you very much for sorting that out for me. But funny enough, the following day, Brad, who organises everything that you see on the channel from Zen to here, also reached out to me and said, go and speak to Mark. So Brad and Lee, thank you very much. Mark, you are an absolute legend. Mark must have spent the best part of several hours with me going through everything over a course of a day. And first of all sent me the connection diagram, which we've already seen and I've shown you, until I said to him, I've got more kit than's on the diagram. And I sent him a picture. And he confirmed that yes, I do have a piece of kit extra that I shouldn't have, and that extra piece of kit is the ISMC, which is this. Now, from what we can work out, this is actually the EFM test head end of everything, and is nothing to do with the DSL testing. He did say that I am missing bits to get this to work. However, looking at the diagram, I'm wondering if I could swap the test head for the ADSL out with this one and actually see if this works. I'm wondering if the only difference is there's the test head with all of that. So that is something that we will try later on. But after that, Mark then very kindly sent me a picture of how one of them should be sitting in their rack. And that is this. And this picture was absolutely fundamental in me being able to plug all of this in because it just showed me where it needed to go. Now this is in one of their racks with their ADSL ZYXEL in exactly the same ZYXEL unit that I've got. This is the front of the splitter unit, the unit that merges both the DSL and PSTN or voice into a single cable that goes off out of the exchange to the customer. And that's represented here by the fact you've got the splitter unit. So all of these cables are coming from the front of the DSLAM, the CO or central office, the PSTN voice input, which is coming in from OpenReach, is going in the back, and then the user port is then what is coming off round this group of cables down here, looped back up and then into the back of the TAM unit. And I'll show a picture of my TAM unit because they have an in and out. And then these cables here then go off out to the OpenReach NDF, which is the master distribution frame, I think it is, or main distribution frame. I'll confirm which way it is, but they go off out to OpenReach and obviously off to the customer. Now, that was great because I can see exactly how it all connects. I don't know what any of these references stand for on here, other than I'm assuming LLU. LLU line, I don't know. ZP and all these I imagine are internal cable references. This is the male side of the TAM, and I believe that is an F for the female side of the TAM, so I know which way they go around. That's fantastic, that's perfect. Zen's picture does show this particular UTEL unit, which I have no idea what it is, but it doesn't appear to be plugged in or turned on, which is great. Now, Mark on the back end of that also sent this, which is a much clearer photo and exactly what I wanted. It shows where all the cables go. Now, what it actually shows on here is something I didn't realize when I was actually looking at this initially and actually looking at where these cables go. The actual switch or hub unit, whatever you want to call it, actually has two inputs for two different things. This is actually handling the switch inputs and also the bus inputs as well, which is there. Now, 1 to 15 is obviously the amount of effectively TAM units you can actually connect, and I'm assuming you can daisy chain all of these up as well. I don't know, but they appear to be addressable, which is what this is on here, and I believe that address switch is actually what's on here. It's just that maybe this is an older version of this. I have no idea. This may even be the one for the EFM, which just happens to be compatible. I honestly don't know. Either way, we know how it's all connected. So I'm going to go off now, unplug all this in, and then I'm going to go and turn it on, and we're going to see if we can connect to it. And that raises the next question as to, has this been factory reset? I have no guides for this whatsoever, and at the time of speaking to Mark, he didn't have any guides. He used to access it with software. So I'm none the wiser as to whether I'm actually going to get in this, but either way, it's one step closer to being able to use it. So let's get it all connected, and then we'll focus on trying to get into the unit. Okay, so this is all connected as per Mark's photo, and I've used different color cables just to illustrate where things are going so you can visually see. But on the yellow cable, we have the switch bus out on there, which is going to the switch bus in on this module. We have the test bus out coming on the blue cable, which is going to the test bus in on this module again, and then port 1 on here is going into the only port available on the TAM matrix on the red cable. Now, I haven't made any RJ21 or telco cables for any of this because they're currently all plugged into the MSAN, and it means I'm going to have to basically butcher them in order to make this work. So I want to make sure this is all working first before we go down that route. Now, speaking in getting this working, we obviously need to get in it. I have a network cable plugged into the Ethernet port, which is going into my laptop, and we're going to run Wireshark and see what this is doing in terms of talking on the network to give us any indication as to what it's currently configured for, and if we can get into it, if it's been factory reset, if it's calling for DHCP, all of that. But that's our next thing. The only thing I have noticed on this is MMI I thought was module to module interconnect, but as we don't have anything else, is this potentially a management interface? Which would make sense, MI, management interface. I have no idea what the M stands for in front of it, but it's the only port as well that isn't populated. There's no other console port on this, so is this a console management port that we could possibly get into at a later date? Again, I don't know, I don't have any documentation for it, but worst case scenario is I will get the multimeter out and we will make a cable, or at least see what's on the end of this to see if it is some form of console output. But for now, I'm going to jump on the laptop, fire up Wireshark and see where we get to. So I've been running Wireshark now on my laptop for over half an hour, and annoyingly there is nothing of any interest to report. If I jump back to it, then you can see the standard multicast discovery traffic that's floating around in the background. You can see a DHCP discovery request that's come out from my laptop that's gone unanswered. But more critically, there is nothing from the UTEL. So what I have done is I've actually plugged the UTEL into the lab network, which is running DHCP, and the microtik responsible for that here didn't give the UTEL an IP address, nor did the UTEL request one. If anything, the port that this was plugged into on the microtik was literally void of all traffic. So it makes me think this is statically configured, but the question is to what? Is it configured for a Zen IP address, or is it configured for a manufacturer's IP address? I simply don't know. What I did do off camera was I've pinged the host name that's on the back of this in conjunction with Zen's sort of DNS structure, and I did actually get an IP address return for that record. It didn't respond, and I haven't included it in this just out of respect for Zen, and also it means I've got to edit it out. So you'll have to trust me when I say I did configure my laptop for an IP address either side of that IP, but I didn't get a response from the UTEL. Now, it's not to say it's wrong, and I also assumed other things like the subnet size. It could mean that there is some form of security policy on the UTEL itself that's preventing me from doing any of that. Either way, I don't know, I'm stuck. So I've reached back out to Mark at Zen to say, do you have any documentation for this or anything that you can share? He did mention in a previous conversation that they do use software to access all of this, and I have said to him, don't send me anything that you're likely to get in trouble for. Literally just send me the documentation and I can work backwards from that. So while that request is in with Mark, I'm going to go and probe the MMI port to see if it's some form of console port, because I think that's going to be my next method of attack, to see if I can get into this and see if it's configured for anything, and if it is, what is it configured for. So while I wait for Mark, I'm going to go and do that. So I've destroyed a network cable to make this slightly easier for myself, but probing around, this does appear to be an RS-232 port. Now the pinout is slightly odd. I need to go back through and just double check everything, because there are some oddities as to where these pins actually are, but this does appear to be a console port, which means if we can put together a cable, hopefully we can talk to it from a console point of view in PuTTY and maybe get some output for it. So I'm going to finish working out this and hopefully come back to you on a PuTTY console. I'm smiling because while I was making our Frankenstein's cable for all of this, Mark has reached out to me from Zen and he has sent me this. This is the UTEL Mini Site Controller Manager User Guide. And yes, I did read that off the screen simply because I have tried several times to do it off the top of my head and failed every single time. Now what is interesting is this guide is bespoke for Zen, and if I scroll down it dates back from 2013, and while I don't think there is anything sensitive in here, again out of respect for Zen I will omit a lot of this, but what I can show you is the software, and the software is quite interesting. It's referred to as the SCM, and it's something Mark referenced earlier on, in that that's what they use to control the UTEL estate or set them up. And it's referenced massively in the document to be used to set these up. Now, I cannot get hold of the software, I cannot find it online, and there might generally be valid reasons for that. One of which is because I believe this has got pre-built profiles in it for every single service provider, and being that it's a custom guide would kind of make sense that you actually have to apply for it as your ISP. Now in here there are things like BT Broadband, BT OpenReach LLU, which I assume was for WLR PSTN testing, Orange, I think that's Jersey Telecom, and Zen. I can't make the rest of them out because they are that bad in terms of image quality, and this is as bad on my screen as it is on the screen capture. But what I can make out is Exchange, which I'm assuming is the host name. We've got default gateway, subnet mask, and UTEST IP address. Now once you set those up, you send it to the UTEL using the software, and you do that by connecting your computer to the MMI port, and the MMI port is a serial connection, so we were on the right path in actually using that as a console port to get access to the device. Now what it does say here is the user should connect their PC to the MMI port of the UTEST using a suitable cable. Now it dawned on me, I actually haven't tried the normal serial cables. So I grabbed the typical CISCO one, that didn't work. I grabbed the advert thing that we've got, that didn't work. And then I read it said, see Annex 1 for the correct pinout. Now it kind of highlights that this might actually be a special cable, but I thought no worries, we've got the pinout, I will just jump down and do that. So if I jump to the bottom of the document, Annex 1 is there, but it's not the pinout for the cable. This seems to be switch type options for what I assume are TAM tests. I have no idea. Either way, the pinout's not there, which is a real pain because it actually now means I'm going to have to finish off making this. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm going to err on a side of caution given the document references potentially a non-standard pinout that I'm unaware of. So my plan is to wire this so we can read from the UTEL hopefully, and then I'll sort out the TX side of it So again, just being a bit cautious, but hopefully that this should then allow us to get into it. My only concern at that point is then for software. It references that software for everything in terms of configuration. And is it going to be a case of that software stores all the commands that get sent to the UTEL and the console connection is just sitting there listening for those commands? Is there going to be any help menu available to it? I honestly don't know, but at least this has confirmed that that is a console port. So I think the best thing for me to do is finish wiring up that cable, and then we will see if we get any data out of it from the console port in PuTTY. So I'm going to do that now, and I will see you at a PuTTY session in a minute. Okay, so I have got that wired in a way that we should be able to receive the output from the UTEL, but not actually send anything to it. In hindsight, I probably should have moved this closer because I need to turn it on. I don't know the baud rate, so I'm just going to stick to 9600. Let's open this up and see if we get anything out of it. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take to boot. This is all an unknown, but if we get anything out of it, then I will be somewhat happy. Right then. Yes, it's all gibberish, which means the baud rate's wrong, but that is a positive sign. Let me amend the baud rate and let's do a new session. Let's close that. We want COM6 and we want 90. Oh, of course we can't send anything, can we? I don't know if it does anything else. Let's restart it. At least we know we did get some output on the first part of it. We're getting there, slowly getting there. Yes! Right. Yeah, I can't type anything, can I? Right, that is a good sign. It does seem to be sitting just at a very basic prompt, which raises concerns from what I was saying earlier as to is this just receiving? But the only way we're going to know that is if I actually connect up the transmit pin for this. So I'm going to go and grab a resistor and stick that in line, and I'm going to power it back up. Right, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so that is connected in line with a resistor, just in case. I think this is the correct pin for this. We'll find out. I mean, nothing's blown up yet. Yes, we've still got the console output for that. Can I type anything? Yes, yes, yes. I don't know what to type. I mean, it's still booting according to this second, so maybe I should just wait until all the relays stop clicking before I start prodding it. But I'm going to do that. I'm going to wait for that boots and then I'm going to come back. Okay, that does appear to have stopped clicking, so I think it has booted. Nothing else has changed on the screen, but let's see if there is a help menu. It doesn't miss that. Help. Okay, well, we're off to a fantastic start, and this was my concern. I honestly don't know what to type. Show? No. Is there a log? Okay. Log print. Okay, well, at least we've got that out of it. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Needs calibration. 15 mil. Okay, so it just looks like self-diagnostics. Test head, okay. Well, that looks like it's completed. Meter. Okay. I mean, obviously this is testing equipment from voltage and resistance point of view, so makes sense. In fact, actually, it's probably what a load of the relay circuits are for different testing circuits inside of it. Okay, that's all well and good. Is there a system command? No. System? No. Config? Okay, well, tab doesn't work. Is there anything on show? No. Anything? Ah, I got to that by hitting tab, so there does appear. So if I do A tab, B tab, that's cool. Okay, so if I just do tab. Ah, okay. So links, echo, site, upgrade, program, buy, Mac, time, sleep, log, so status, cost, you don't need hi. Ah, I remember in the guide seeing hi. It actually sends hi. Do I have to log into this? Password level is set to no access. Okay. Does that mean I can't get into this from a console point of view? If I do hi question mark, why star? Is this some form of password that needs to be typed in? Password? I mean, it's not even telling me it's incorrect, so I don't even know if that's correct. I don't even know if I can log in at console level. Is there anything here? I mean, status, no access. Perfect. Up, no access. Oh, great. So is this, I can't get into anything because I'm not logged in, but I can't log in because there's no console access. Oh, this is an emotional roller coaster. It's like one step forward and almost 2 steps back. Can I get to ping? I can't even get to ping. Ah, and it's even calling me dumb as well. Look. I don't know what dumb does. Dumb does dumb okay. What? I mean, even just hitting OK comes up with OK, or enter, it comes up with OK. There's IP config. Ah! Oh, I'm going to have to blur that out. But that is not the IP address I got back when I pinged the host name for that. And I've got the subnet size as well. That is the subnet size I put in earlier as well, on the assumption it was going to be something similar based on what I'd seen before. But as I said, the IP address is completely different. Right. I'm going to go and configure my laptop with that IP address or one adjacent to it, because it's different, as I said, from what I saw earlier, and see if we can get into it. Right. I'm going to come back in a minute. Right. You didn't need to see me configuring all of that because I would have had to edit it all out, and I've had to move the window slightly for the capture because it's displaying the IP address as well, and it just saves me editing it. But we have a login screen for the UTEL, which is absolutely phenomenal. The issue I have is I don't have the details for it. That user guide doesn't specify even a default username and password. Everything has to be configured through the software, and in fact even in that guide there is no mention of setting a username and password. So I'm wondering if there is another guide or it's in another document, but everything I have put in, the usual password admin, all this, that and the other, just does not work. It just oh, as I said a minute ago, this is literally a roller coaster. I seem to get further and further and further and then hit another roadblock. But we've come this far. I can't be knocked down by a bloody login screen. The only thing I can do is reach out to Zen to ask for help. I've got no other choice. I can't get into it. I've been through the CLI structure. I cannot do anything on that CLI in PuTTY without logging in. And all the commands, anything that requires permission to do anything, says no access. So even if I was to get the command to factory reset it, I can't run it. And the command to factory reset it doesn't seem to exist. In there is such a basic level of commands, it's unreal. But there is nothing in there that I can see to reset it. So, and the issue I've got is as well, even if I do factory reset it, am I going to still be able to access it, or is it going to require the software to set back up? I think I'm in that place where I need them to help, and access it as is. And if we can get into it, then see if we can change the settings via the GUI, because I run the risk of not getting access to it if we do manage to factory reset it, and we've come this far. So I'm going to reach back out to Mark to see if he can help, and fingers crossed I come back to you at a login page. So it is the following day, as you can probably tell by the fact I'm no longer wearing the green top underneath my hoodie, but a lot has happened in that time. I've been speaking to Mark quite a bit, and it transpires that this particular unit, after I gave him the IP address and the hostname, was never part of their U-Tel migration. This never made it onto the new network, and as such it was pulled out of the network in roughly 2015. This means it was still subject to the pre-U-Tel migration that they had, and that means we're in the device. This is so cool. Now, I haven't looked at this any further than that, and there are a few things I need to look at doing. One of them in particular is changing the IP address. However, it's not on this page. As to whether it ends up anywhere else or not, I don't know, but I do need to sort that out at some point. But for now, let's have a quick look around it. Now, there's bits up here underneath me that you can't see, which is actually referring to test1.bt.lcroc, which is the host name for this, which actually transpires it was from Rochdale Exchange, which makes perfect sense because obviously Zen are a ISP base over in Rochdale, and I think this came out with all the EFM stuff back around that era as well. So let's have a flick through it. Test line, directory number. Now that would make sense because typically with this you would have tie pairs and you have references. So I'm assuming there is some sort of database that would marry up WLR lines or PSTN phone numbers with tie pairs as to how this mapped across. No idea. We're not going to start looking into that in case there is anything in there that shouldn't be. Test bus 1 and 2, I think. 1 selected. I have no idea how many test buses. Actually, this has test bus A and B. So is A1 and 2B? I don't know. LA1, card 1? I don't know. It doesn't like those. I'm assuming... I have no idea what any of this means, and again I've got no documentation. Well, technically that's a lie. I have got the other bit of documentation, and Mark has sent me user guide version 2 for this, which I think goes into the testing and a bit more. I kind of got excited and jumped straight into this. I didn't actually check the test, but there seems to be line tests or test types, which is a line test, quick test, full test exchange, CLI check, noise, NB noise. No idea if these are presets, which they appear to be. Mode, voltage, resistance, capacitance, or so typically I think we're AB over here, but in fact there's actually a service test Zen which doesn't show anything. Now this is probably the predefined test that they have had on the profiles as we saw in the original ones, but as to what any of this runs I don't know. Display option, display results. Okay, so it looks like you can copy them out. And there's start test. Now I'm not going to click anything because I haven't got anything connected to it, but ultimately we will run a test on this to see what the output is, even with nothing connected. I'd imagine it'll fail catastrophically, but display results, there's obviously nothing in there. Stored results. Okay, so this has got a load of historic data in there. Is there anything in here I can click on that's going to show anything that shouldn't? Is that even a link? Yes. Okay, I can't see any circuit details on here in reference to any usernames. Having said this, this is over 13 years old at this point, so that test failed. Disconnect AB 52 meters, CPE, the date, test time. You've got capacitance values, volts on the AC, volts on the DC, balance, line, termination. So all of this in normal day-to-day tests we don't really see. So it's nice to actually see a proper U-Tel test. Typically when the results come back into us through our various portals, we literally just get the result as whether it's failed or passed, and typically the fault details. We don't get anything else like this. So it's quite cool to see. Now again, this dates back from 2013, so it's possible all these test metrics have changed. It's also possible they're identical. I don't honestly know. What's interesting is I'm not seeing any ADSL or DSL test on this. And interesting, I didn't see a DSL test in here either. So I think I've got some learning to do in how to actually run a proper test on it, or full, I mean, maybe even line test, because we did see, or full test, maybe a full test does it. I don't know. We'll only find out by messing around with it. But is there another one I can select? These look all to be run around the same time. So was this put in during testing? Let's load one of the others. So that's got volts on it this time from a DC point of view. Leakage on battery. Oh, it's actually, yeah, CP unknown. Shorter line test. Okay, so I think these may have been pre-commissioning tests looking at the time. I mean, there are literally hundreds of results in here. What is that one? Okay. That is showing showtime, which means there should be, yes, there's DSL test data. So this head end can do DSL testing. That is awesome. Interestingly, it looks like it's potentially an 8 megs. I mean, I don't even know if the router that's in here is ADSL2 plus or ADSL. We'll have to just test it and see what profiles that this can test on with the DSLAM set to different modes. There is so much in-depth testing that we can do with this. I mean, I need to work out how it all works. And again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I don't know how any of this works. What is in administration? Status. Version, configure version 1, software version, serial number 92. I don't want to click on network in case there's anything in there but shouldn't be in there. Reset, recalibrate, current time. I don't even know what the current time is on this. I don't even know if it's got it. And the test bus IP address for the, I'm assuming that's for the card that we saw on the left hand side. I can't remember which one that was, maybe the control card. Okay, either way, this is cool. The next thing I want to do is run a line test in its current state. The question is, what do I run a line test on? I'm assuming, I don't know what LA is, line adapter? One. Is yellow good? Green would be better. Well, it doesn't seem to change. Cards, 1, because there's only one of them, I guess. And port 1? I haven't the foggiest. I mean, I could just run the Zen service test and see what that does, I guess. But I'm assuming I have to select the port in order for that to run. Anyway, actually, this is very reminiscent of everything that was in that annex document about maybe the different modes that run. It was on split, wasn't it? Let's run a test. It's clicking away. I have just out of reach, if I can move this over, there is a little glass icon just floating around in the background. In fact, actually, if I move it over, and you can actually see the host name, and it actually says it's working, so I assume it's running the test. I'm going to move myself back over in a really weird way. Now, I have no idea how long this test is going to take. Typically, when we ran these tests, it was potentially a good few minutes of just waiting for these test results to come back. So, and again, I don't know if this is doing a DSL test. Thinking about it, I should have left the lid off because then I could have actually seen if this is powering up the ADSL router that's in there. There's a lot we can play with in this. As to whether I get around to it in this video is another thing, because this looks like it's going to be quite in-depth and I need to make all the cables, need to understand all the tests. It'll be interesting to see what this come back with. I would love to be able to end this on a point where we're running a test with a router connected. I mean, this may even require the PSTN line voltage on this as well to run. So I might need to get the PSTN to IP analog ATA adapter out and plug that in, which means I'm going to need to get the splitter unit back out for the ZYXEL, which I only took out a couple of weeks ago and put in the loft so I could put the MSAN in for the EFM. It's a good problem to have, I'm happy. but it means I need to make an awful lot of code. Oh, that's clicked. Ah, passed. Idle. I did actually run a DSL test. How is... Okay, so the Zen test looks like it runs the DSL test, which is cool. What about an actual physical line test? But I'm curious as to how that's passed, given the fact that there is no DSLAM plugged in for it, and obviously all that is 0. More experimentation is required, and I think I need to wire all this up properly. So that is what I'm going to go and do now. It means I've got to pull all the cables out of the Exchange cabinet that I meticulously cabled in literally before Christmas when we redid that rack. Because I'm going to need... In fact, I don't even know. Actually, off camera, I did grab this off of eBay, which I thought I got for a really cheap score because it was only like £5. It turns out it's the female version of the connector, not the male connector, which is what all of this uses. However, the front of the TAM is actually a male style connector. So this should actually work. And actually thinking about it, that would have been a problem because if I didn't have this, I wouldn't have been able to take the feed out of that because it's a different connector from the one on the back. So as I've said in previous videos, things happen for a reason. That actually might come good. Okay, that makes that a little bit easier, and then I need to work out everything else. Right, I'm going to go and wire this up and I'll come back in a bit. I am back and it is the next day, and annoyingly I am a cable short, which I have tried to source locally. However, I can't get one. And unlike Collab, who can just order a RJ21 or telco cable on Amazon, that is not something that exists in the UK. And it's annoying because I've gone through all the hassle of getting the splitter unit out of the loft specifically for this. Now, I took the splitter unit out of the Exchange cabinet to fit the EFM chassis in. And as you may recall in that video, I actually picked up a really cheap RJ21 cable off of eBay at the time and thought I'd got a really good deal. However, it transpired that that was the female version of the cable and everything else needed the male version. Now, what I hadn't noticed is the TAM on the front actually needs a female connector. So if I hadn't have had that cable spare in the background, I wouldn't even be doing these tests. I'd be waiting for even more cables. And as I say, things happen for a reason. But what that means is I'm going to have to split this up into 2 separate tests. I've currently got the DSLAM plugged into the back of the TAM. The front of the TAM is going off to the socket. We will run a DSL test first, and then I will switch over to doing voice and we'll run a voice test. I have asked them if they've got another couple of cables spare, and hopefully they can send that on the next pallet that comes across. But it does mean we'll have to circle back on this at a later date, which isn't a bad thing because I said I want to do other things with this moving forward anyway. So if we jump over to the UTEL test unit itself, going to test line, I have no idea if this is actually going to test on the circuit. It should be. What I have done is I've thrown up an overhead camera, which I think is still recording. Bear with me. Yes, it is, and I'll throw that up on screen now. That's an overview of the DRATEC modem. It's currently connected and in sync and is all the way back through networking online. And also I've taken the lid off the TAM so we can see the router inside, because I want to see if it brings that modem or router even internally online when we run this test. I also don't know how these ports are mapped across on this. This could be the other side of the bus. I simply don't know. The entire cable is pushed into the back of the TAM, so the TAM has all the ports available to it on the DSLAM. So I'm expecting this to be what's referred to as an intrusive test, where I'm assuming the TAM is going to remap internally the input from the DSLAM locally to the test head and run on the test. So we should see the DRATEC, I was going to say DLAM, drop out of sync, and we should see the actual test module, the router inside the test unit, potentially come into sync, I assume. I don't know. Let's run the test. It's not me rambling. Let's run the Zen test. Let's hit start test. I have no idea how long this is going to take. I can't even see what's going on. Oh, I have actually just seen the router come online. So it does bring that router online when it runs these tests. And I've also put a little couple of like washers in so you can actually see the lights that we're looking for, because it's quite light over there. While this test runs, I just need to give a massive thank you to 3 people at Zen. Brad, Lee, sorry, mine went, and Mark. You guys are absolutely phenomenal. If it wasn't for you guys, this video would not exist. And I say to people at the end of every video that Zen is a fantastic place. There's a fantastic bunch of people. You guys are living proof of just how fantastic Zen is. If it wasn't for you, I probably would have got to the console interface, been presented with the IP address, and then got stuck at the login screen. You guys have just bent over backwards for me, and I cannot thank you enough. And I shall make sure everyone at Zen knows that as well. So thank you very much for your help with all of this, because this video would not have happened. We would not be live testing. You guys are awesome. That is attempting to sync. I can see a massive flashing light out the corner of my eyes. I don't know if the DataCentre has dropped out of sync. Yes, the DataCentre has dropped out of sync. I'm going to have to watch this footage back and actually see when that happens. Now, I don't know if that router in here is going to sync, because I think this is on an ADSL 2+ profile, and I don't know what that router is in the tested. I think it's only an ADSL one based on the tests that we saw previously. So I might have to log in to the ZYXEL and adjust the profile on it if it doesn't sync, and then rerun the test. That is super cool to see. If actually, no, the flashing light's actually the LAN light. I've actually covered over the light for the DSL. I can't actually see myself what's going on. And I don't have the feed from that into OBS. It's on a separate camera. More on that later. We'll have to look. I think it's still booting, you know. Interesting. It didn't sync. As soon as the LAN light stopped flashing, it cut the power out to the router. Have I not plugged this back in properly? Or are we testing on the wrong head? I don't know. I'm going to go and have a look a bit more, and then I'll come back and we'll rerun the test. Okay, I am back. I've been messing around. I've also taken the time to read some of the manual that Mark sent me, and I say some of it. I haven't read all of it. It's quite in depth, and it goes on about all the tests that can be done. But it goes on about setting up this particular test. Now, LA is logical address, and according to this, it should always be 1 unless it's a Fujitsu DSLAM. Bear in mind, this document is over 13 years old now. Card, it refers to the bus port, so we're going to refer to that switch hub as a bus module now. So effectively it's what port it is plugged into that, and it was plugged in on port 1, so it'd be bus port 1, and then the relay, which is effectively the pair. So everything we had in was correct. I get the sneaking suspicion the test wasn't running, or at least the router and the test head wasn't connecting because of the profile on the DSLAM. Bear in mind, the ZYXEL DSLAM is a lot newer than this test head. Now, I have proven that because I have actually gone into the UTEL, and I did actually run a test on something that doesn't exist. And interesting, if you run a test on something that doesn't exist like this and you run start, you instantly get a switch module or TAM switch failed. So it is actually listening to the TAM to connect the circuit back. Now, if I put it on a port that has nothing plugged into it, in that it is connected to the DSLAM but there's no DSL on it, it doesn't drop the DSL service off of the DataCentre. So what we had in was correct. So it is actually testing that circuit. It's just the router in the test hen is not syncing properly. So what I've done, and I've actually moved this around, so I actually need to move this around because I've now put it on bus port 4 just to see if the others weren't active, but as I said, that's changed since. That is where it currently is sitting. It also turns out that a split test is probably the best test for this. The Exchange one does do a similar test as well, but I think split, from what I've read, is better because it's doing multiple tests and it's also testing the DSL in and out from the DSLAM. So I've got that set up. I have changed the DSLAM to GDMT, which is ADSL. I've also set it to a default profile so the router can try and sync whatever it wants. The DataCentre is currently in sync at basically 12 meg down and 864 up, which is what the actual maximum was for ADSL back in the day. It's just OpenReach used to limit it to 8 meg on the download. So we're going to rerun this test and see what happens. And I need to set that camera to record. So I'm going to go and do that now. 1 second. Right, that is recording. I'm going to hit the test. I'm going to glare over at this to see if it's dropping the DSL on the DataCentre, which it has done. It has dropped the DSL and the Draytech, and I apologise if you got a face full of my head just then. I'm going to leave this far, but there's no, I was going to stop the recording, but this test takes 2 minutes and I don't really want 2 minutes of dead silence. So I'm going to come back if that router jumps into sync. That has also failed. The Draytech has come back into sync. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to power up that router in the board separately, unplug it from everything else and plug it straight into the ZYXEL to see if it even syncs. To see, I don't even know if it works. So let's try that, and then if it does work, then we at least know it's the mapping on all the bus that's the issue. Okay, so the plot thickens. Now I have powered this directly. Everything is unplugged. The test head is still powered up, so I'm being a little bit cautious. But I've plugged the router directly into the phone socket, and it's in sync. So it means it's not transferring the pair across to this properly. Now it's odd because, as I said, if I run it on the correct bus but the wrong pair, it doesn't drop the Draytech out of sync. So it's definitely selecting the right pair. It's just not getting to the test head, and everything is plugged in. Everything is clearly working because it's sending the signal down to the test head to swap it all. I'll have a bit more of a play. So a few minutes ago, this happened. Yes! We got a sync light on the router internally after going back and forth for what has felt like hours. So I plugged the router directly into the DSLAM, as you saw, and it synced. I set the profile back on the DSLAM to auto everything, and looking at the logs, it synced to ADSL 24 speeds. ADSL 24? ADSL 2 plus at 24 meg speeds. It synced, it was happy, there was no issues with it at all. My attention then turned to maybe when the router's booting up, it's getting the Zen profile, and there's something in there that's changing something, maybe like VCI and VPI values. So I unplugged the Ethernet cable and ran the test with it. Still didn't work. I've tried changing the RJ11 cable, didn't work. I've tried changing the bus again. I've tried changing the connection cables between the TAM and the bus matrix. All the same scenarios. It basically would not route the DSL signal from the TAM to the head end. And I'd actually found out there's a little flashing LED on the TAM when it makes connection. And the fact that it was actually communicating with the TAM and dropping DSL suggested that the relays were doing their job. It just wasn't feeding back the DSL signal. And then it kind of dawned on me that the TAM is acting obviously as a switch. So when the relay is clicking, it's diverting the DSL signal back through the test bus and into the head end. What if I've got the TAM wired wrong? In that my assumption was the feeds came in through the back and out on the front, which would kind of make sense because you'd want to be able to open reach to get to their side if they needed to. And I've been back through the pictures and that's certainly what it seemed like. However, I made custom cables up to the point where I don't have any now to be able to do the analog PSTN testing because of how I've had to wire this, but it works. We have a DSL test. It turns out the input for the TAM is actually on the front and the output is on the rear of the device. As soon as I did that and ran the test, not assuming to get anywhere, I was solely confident that it was going to be a cable issue of some form, but I didn't really think it was going to be the TAM. I was kind of getting to the point where I was basically clutching at straws, but it works. That is so cool. We have our results. It's in sync at basically the full speed, which is roughly the profile speed. I don't know why it's a kilobit less, but either way, it's run the full test. We've got the assumption of all the matrix right and everything, how it's doing its test. That is so cool. Now I have run multiple tests. This list is not even comprehensive, the amount of tests I've run. It seems to be dropping off the last ones, but I did run a couple of analog tests while I was doing this without anything plugged into it, and it does actually do an analog test. It's just the fact that I don't have now anywhere near as many cables as I need to be able to do this, because I've had to the way it's wired to push it all back in. I don't have cables that are male to female to come out of the DSLAM and into the front of the TAM unit. I've had to basically use the female version of it and wire it. Honestly, here is a mess. I will take a picture and throw it up on screen, but I'm happy to at least get this far and end on this. I'm going to have to order in a load more cables to do this. And I've seen, the test results on this have come back saying that there's a disconnect on the MDF to AB, which is correct because of course it's not in. There's a CPE disconnect as well. It's testing at 1 meter. It's doing distance testing. It's cool. I mean, it's even like no termination. There is nothing on the end of it. It's really cool. I really want to dive into this more in future videos. But as per usual, I'm editing this as I go. And I know this is approaching an hour, if not slightly over now with all this messing around with all of this. But I am really pleased with that. To see that test actually run is amazing. I'm really happy with it. Now, I have actually dived through other bits on this as well, and as I said, there's a lot more we can do with it, so there will be a part 2 on this. I'm going to close up all of this and tidy up all of this. We will recap on absolutely everything, also some channel news as well, because I'm really excited to bring this update to you guys as well. So let me stop talking, let me jump over there and we will close this out. So when we first started this, I was not sure if we were even going to get to the point where this was going to work, with no manuals, no idea of how this state of play with this was. I honestly went into this with my eyes closed, as I do with almost every video. But if it wasn't for Mark at Zen in particular spending so much time with me and getting me all the documentation and pictures, I wouldn't have got to the point I had with this. And this brings me back to my point. Zen are a fantastic bunch of people and leads me onto this. If it wasn't for Zen, this channel would not exist in the format it does. I wouldn't have had the DSLAM, I wouldn't have had all this cool stuff to play with, and more on the way. So if you are in the market for residential broadband, go and check out Zen. The link is in the video description below. And speaking of this as well, there's still so much more I want to do with it. We want to do full exchange testing on it, PSTN testing. We want to mess around with the EFM module to see if we are missing anything with that, and generally have a part 2 on this and just play with it in more depth, because I think that's going to be really interesting. Speaking of all of that as well, in terms of the channel and the update that I wanted to give you, this channel has grown beyond my wildest expectations in 2025. The community that has come on the back of it, it's in Discord, which you need to go and get involved with as well, has just blown me away. It really has. The support for you guys in terms of Patreon and the store, again, has just been phenomenal. Those are linked in the video description below if you want to look at those, but please don't feel you have to. This channel is built basically on me in my spare time trying to give you all of this kit, and I am fully dedicated to this channel and you guys as well, to the point where I have gone and bought a Sony ZV-E10 4K camera, and yes, I know there are other ones and newer ones on the market, but that comes highly recommended. I want to try and push the quality of the content that I give to the absolute maximum I can. So I'm planning to be doing stuff in 4K as well, and hopefully this will give a much clearer image going forward. This has cost me almost £1,000 for the camera and all the other extra options I've got with it as well. It's been quite a bit of a discussion on Discord about how much money you can spend on all of this. So if you're not on Discord, make sure you don't get involved in Discord. But yeah, I'm dedicated to the channel, I'm dedicated to you lot. So if you do want to give me some money, the Patreon link is in the video description, but again, don't feel you need to. So anyway, right guys, if you are still here, you are absolutely amazing. I cannot thank you enough. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.